Hello, welcome. Welcome to this session of the BCS London branches. Really glad you've joined us. And oh boy, what a roller coaster it's been. Because here we are sitting in London where there's a tube strike, no, a tube and rail strike. Oh, no, there isn't. We've been trying to change to pick the mood, but the mood has been changing all the time too. So on screen, you can see that it says this event is hybrid, in person at BCS and live webinar. Well, if you're watching this in person at BCS, please do make a comment on the chat and tell us, because we're hoping that everybody is actually on the live webinar. And we've got plenty of people in the waiting room and actually on our webinar watching. Well, my name is Dalim. I'm in a very fortunate position of being the chairman of three great groups in the BCS: North London, Central London, and South London, the London branches. And I've got some of my colleagues with me here, but I'll introduce you to just a couple of them. There are lots more online. And you too, of course, are most welcome to tell us, where are you? Where are you located right now? Tell us which branch you belong to, or which SG, if you wish. But the important thing is, tell us, where are you right now? And I've got another question. Is it snowing where you are? Because shock horror, here I am sitting in North London and it started snowing. So I'm hoping that it's going to stop before long, because it's not pleasant snow. It's not sort of lovely, deep snowball snow. It's little dribs and drabs, of course, in North London. But at least I'm safe and warm at home, and I hope you are too. But we have got a few leftovers from Christmas here at home. And I hope you have enjoyed Christmas, New Year, and all those good things. And now you're fighting fit and looking forward to great things happening in 2024. Well, we're kicking off in a really big way. We are running this session, which is a Wominspiration session, right at the start of the year. And we've got two really great women that I want to introduce you. One of them is my friend and colleague, Diana Kojakaru, who's going to be our interviewer today. And she is a member of North London Branch Committee, as am I. The other one is David Grundy, who is our technical coordinator for this session. And he is the secretary of Central London Branch. But I mentioned two great women. The other one, of course, is our special guest, our celebrity guest, Holly Porter. And Diana will tell you a little bit more about her. But remember, if you want to make a comment or if you want to ask a question, please enter the details in the chat stroke Q&A. We'll pick it up. To be exact, Diana and David will pick it up, and we'll either answer your question if it's not for Holly, or channel it to Holly so that you get your answers as well. We're all set for around about a 1 hour session, and we'll be running through 7:30, maybe a bit longer. It's up to you. But I'm really excited to welcome Holly and hand you over now to Diana.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Dalim, for that presentation. So we're here tonight with Holly, who is a managing director at BCS and also leads the institute at BCS, which supports the development of the competent, ethical, and inclusive technology professionals. She works with both individuals and organizations who are members and volunteers in over 100 regional and special interest groups. And I am sure that you should know about her at least, since most of you are part of BCS and probably part of a specialist group or part of a region. Her focus is to help us members shape their own futures and shape the future of technology as part of the BCS membership community. She joined us at BCS in 2019 from GSU1 UK, which is a global data standards organization, where she was chief of marketing and the membership director. Prior to this, she was actually within marketing and communications. So I would like to start off by asking Holly to tell us a bit more about her education and career path, because it's a bit eclectic since you now work so much in technology, but really you come from a marketing background. So let's start with that. How come? What has been your background in this sense within the education and then professional career?
Sure. Firstly, I'd just like to say Happy New Year to everybody, because we've still got that opportunity. And this is a great experience for me because it's not something that I'm used to doing, because in my role normally what we do is we focus on facilitating our members and sharing their voices. So I was quite surprised when I was invited to do this, but very, very pleased. And so happy to sort of share my background. And I think you're right, Diana, it's not a traditional background at all. Certainly, I don't have a technology background, although my previous role at GS1 was a data standards organization. So, and I think all of my careers have had technical aspects to them in some shape or form. But I think I've used the expression squiggly careers because I heard somebody else say that recently. I really liked it, and it resonated certainly with my experience. So I suppose I sort of started out at school and just, my interest was piqued by languages. So I was quite good at languages. I had a really inspiring teacher, a German teacher who organised foreign exchanges. So we had, I had an exchange pal, and I was with the family for 4 years, and sort of I spent time with them in the twin town, and they came to us, and I think that really helped to bring that experience to life. And also, spending time in a different culture was a really positive thing for me. And when I got to my A-levels, I knew I wanted to go to university. But I have to say that, I think schools have a difficult job, because I certainly didn't get any form of structured career guidance at school. And I know as BCS, it's something that we really want to try and cement and do better at, certainly when we try to encourage people to take technology roles. But my experience was that, I was encouraged to go for university, but not anything in particular. So I sort of followed my passion really, and chose the university for the course, and also for the fact that it had the opportunity to spend time working abroad. So I did languages, I did German and Spanish, and I had the opportunity to spend 5 months at university in Spain and also work in Germany. So I worked in a trade publishing house translating, and that was a really good induction to the work environment, really good experience to live abroad and actually to start to earn some money. And then at the end of that experience, I wanted to I wanted not to move home, just because I came from quite a rural background and didn't want to go back to the middle of the countryside. I wanted to kind of stand on my own 2 feet and earn money. So I joined what we call the milk rounds, that many of you will know, where you sort of apply for opportunities with different companies. So I applied for graduate schemes and really sort of ended up focusing on those that were more around manufacturing. And I don't really know why. I just like the idea of, something that was thought about, designed and manufactured, something, product came out at the end of it, and I would be part of that process. So I did join a packaging and chemicals group, Foretold, on their grad scheme, and quickly found myself in customer services using my languages, which was important. And had the benefit through the grad scheme of having a bit more structured training approach initially. And then the company got acquired by a German organization. I had one of those sort of stick or twist moments, as I call it, where they said, well, I understand you might not want to go, but if you do want to go, there's an opportunity to go and work in Germany. But if not, we'll find you something to do here. And I was 26 at the time and thought, well, what have I got to lose? And, I love Germany, so I'll just go. And I think it was a great thing to do, and it really has sort of shaped my career. And I know we're going to talk about that shortly, so I won't go into detail now. But spent sort of 18 months out in Germany, and then came back to the UK, continued in manufacturing. I joined DS Smith, the packaging company. Initially, I had my first management role, age 27, age 28 at that point, and again had some international teams. So and then the opportunity to move into different roles. We went into business development and product management, so after the customer services piece. So even within that role, I moved. And then I had a complete change because we were doing a marketing project and we'd engaged an agency to work with us. And I was quite inspired by the two ladies that I met that came to do the brief and to start talking about the campaign, and saw people of my age in a completely different type of role, quite fast moving, and really liked the look of it. And so started talking to them more about the company and ended up moving to work for that agency. And I think, for me, that was, I took a step back, so I had to start at the bottom and learn a completely new field, and sort of lost the job title and but it was just important for me to try. I was so interested in it that it was important to do that at that point. And then I worked there for about 4 years, a lot of experience in corporate communications, crisis management, PR, with lots of different companies. So lots of exposure to different environments, different stakeholders. And then ended up joining one of the clients, a quoted logistics company called Wincanton, that effectively moves all the goods for people like the supermarkets, does a lot of the fuel deliveries. So really sort of the name behind the scenes in the supply chain. And at that point, it was had a acquisition focus. So we did several acquisitions across Europe. And that was quite exciting for me in a marketing PR role. And then I had an opportunity for a promotion because both of my bosses left in quite quick succession, and I was offered the opportunity to step into their combined roles. And so I think I was there for 7 years and then joined the GS1 UK, and that was the point of my career when I wanted to have a seat around the senior table, have an executive role, and focus in on sort of marketing and membership, and go into more of a charitable, purpose-driven organisation. So that's where that journey started. That was about 10 years ago now. And so that was a membership model. And then I've been at BCS for 4 years. So I joined initially as membership director, and just over a year ago became managing director of the institute when Rashik had come into BCS as CEO. And now, the journey hasn't really stopped, because I've recently, so this time last year, became trustee of an internet safety charity called Southwest Good for Learning. And they've been doing a huge amount around the online safety bill and around safety in schools. And it's really important work around things like revenge porn on the internet. They have helplines, and it's a really tiny charity but makes a really, really big impact. And so that work's really interesting from a trustee perspective. I'd also recently taken on the chair of FedIP, and FedIP are the professional registrations in health and care. BCS is one of the founder members, and there are 5 other professional bodies. And so FedIP is the organisation that is the custodian of those standards. And so I've recently taken on the chair role of FedIP. So pretty busy alongside the day job, but that's a bit of a potted history, I suppose, of my career to date.
Okay, thank you very much, Holly, for that answer. And it was absolutely full of information, so I'll just kind of try to unpack from now on. My first question would be if you can share a personal experience when navigating this squiggly career path, and how that led you to unexpected benefits or growth opportunities. Because from what I wrote down, you mentioned going from languages to manufacturing, customer service, management, marketing, and then executive roles. So I'm really interested to see how did you changing your career and setting that you still have to try new things out maybe brought unexpected benefits, and what were the opportunities out there for growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think for some people listening, this would be their absolute worst nightmare, wouldn't it? To think, well, there's no structure to this, but it sort of did in some way follow a path. And I think for me, the approach that I've taken is that, there's that great book by Sheryl Sandberg, Lean In, and we've all started using the expression lean in. So I think if there's a few things that I did along the way, is that I've always had this attitude of being quite curious and wanting to lean in and sort of talk to other people, and that sort of helped to shape this pathway. And I think if you kind of approach things with that attitude, it helps you to stand out, and it means that you're open for people talking to you when things come up. And certainly something that we've done recently as a team at BCS, of my team, we talked about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and sort of really trying to be open to opportunities. So that's characterized certainly how I've behaved, I suppose. And I think opportunities find you to an extent. I think also by being willing to try new things, you might take a few risks along the way, but you do develop lots of transferable skills. And I think that's one thing that I would say, is that transferable skills has become much more of a term now, and certainly we talk about it all the time in relation to tech, but it's really true in terms of collaboration, empathy, and sort of understanding sort of team dynamics. I think also problem solving and analytical skills. So and just really the importance for me has been having something that I feel that I can really make a difference at, something to get my teeth into. And so those have been the criteria that I've used. Is it going to challenge me? Is it do I like the people who I'm working with, or the culture that I'm going into? Because that's a really important piece for me. And ultimately, am I going to keep moving and learning? I heard Ella Mills from Deliciously Ella interviewed on Radio 5 the other day as I was driving back from Swansea, and she used the term progression over perfection. And I think that's very true for me. I think if you sort of try to go for perfection all the time, you can end up being disappointed. So it's just important to keep learning and to keep that momentum. And so just a few examples of where that's happened. I'm just trying to have a look at my notes, so I've got lots to tell you. But I think in my graduate job, the move to Germany, I didn't have to do it, but it was a bit of a leap of faith. And then once I was there, because I got to know a lot of people and find out about what they do, then when an opportunity came up to for a big packaging exhibition to man the stand, I was chosen to go and man the stand, probably also because of my language skills. But just having that opportunity wouldn't have happened if I'd have sort of hidden in the corner and just got on with my job. And I think what's happened is because of the different environments I've worked in and the different sectors, I've kind of got quite a good handle on how a business works, and the cause and effect, and how things generally get done, which has been really helpful to me. And I think also you learn more about your own strengths and weaknesses along the way. I think also, just showing an interest in the product and in customers in general, when I was at DS Smith, enabled me to put myself forward for a business development role. And then when I was in the PR agency, just through the relationships that I've built with the clients, they got to know a little bit more about me, that I had some marketing experience in my background. So I'd done the Chartered Institute marketing qualifications when I was at Courtauld initially, actually, that they didn't know. And so there was a job going as UK and Ireland marketing manager. And I just said, oh, well, would you consider an application for that from me? I know I don't have a background that's an exact fit, but just sort of being able to put my hat in the ring, as they say, just because that relationship led to exploring a broader skill set. So just a few examples of, how that's manifested itself. And led to new opportunities. And I think also I like to have a good run at things. So I've never been one to sort of leave a job. I think if you're in a circumstance where it's really not working, you need to know and try and cut your losses. But I've always wanted to give jobs long enough so that I can make an impact. And, so I've never been anywhere less than 3 years. and tend to sort of like a slightly longer run at it than that. So you can tell from what I'm saying that I've got quite a lot of experience now. I've been working for over 25 years, so been able to do that, which is great.
It sounds absolutely amazing, and I really like the idea of the fact that this squiggly path history kind of made you be seen as a possible candidate for other things that you might have not necessarily tried or think about, but your friends were like, hey, you do have the transferable skills, it might be a fit. And I really want to focus back on what you said regarding progression over perfection. Somebody also mentioned it in the chat. I think it's such a nice motto to kind of have in your professional career or just in your life in general. And talking about this, because you mentioned that you wouldn't necessarily stay there in case something wouldn't work. Have you ever had this moment in which you have decided that at any point in time it's time for a change and you felt like there wasn't really much that you could have done in that position anymore, so you decided to move to the next one?
Yes, probably 3 times. And I think that's not a failure. I think so it's just it's good to know when your work is done, and I think you start to feel it if you're not as enthusiastic maybe, or you're running out of ideas, or you're not feeling you're making the difference that you could make. So I think self-reflection is really important in this. And also, you know, just thinking if you've been in a role for quite a long time, sometimes it's time to give somebody else the opportunity. But and also whether you've still got that opportunity for growth and momentum. And I think that's the thing that's always led me to think, well, is it time for a change? Is it not? So I guess the PR agencies, that opportunity coming up when I was in manufacturing, while I was in manufacturing, I was doing business development. I'd enjoyed it, but I was doing an awful lot of driving. I was in the car a lot of the time, driving around the country, and it was quite tiring. And while I enjoyed the product management and business development, I thought, well, it uses some of my skills, but probably not all of them. And I'd always loved writing, and I've got quite a creative mindset. And so, when I met the two ladies from the PR agency, that really piqued my interest. And I think sometimes you just have to follow your instincts. And it did actually use quite a lot of the latent skills that I did have, and things like the writing, the communication. But it taught me things like how important it is to build a network, how to influence and persuade, and also completely different culture. If you think about manufacturing, quite hard work, quite very structured, very process driven, because it has to be. The PR agency is probably more unstructured. It's sort of quite agile, fast moving, small teams. It's fun. And so you work in your own small team, but then you'll work on projects with other teams, you'll blend in with the clients, you'll have a whole range of different work and different products and different types of companies. So it sort of teaches you to think, but also how to get things done and how to work as a team. And so that's definitely what I learned there, and did some really fun stuff along the way as well. And also how to work with the media. That's always quite interesting. So we managed all the fuel strikes and crisis management, things like that, but also the first examples of the degradable plastic bags that the supermarkets had. So I worked on a launch for that. So just having those opportunities, I'd never realised when I set out that I was going to be doing things like that, but actually you could trace the path to it. I guess the second example is after I've been at Wincanton, so the logistics company, for 7 years. I'd had this promotion opportunity. I'd just have grown into that role. And I can talk a little bit more about that at some point, because it wasn't the easiest experience. But so really enjoyed having the seniority, being part of the senior team. But I was working directly into the CEO. And yet I wasn't part of the executive team. And I knew, because of the setup of the business, that the marketing and communications director was not going to get the opportunity to be on the exec team, because it was a very operationally focused company. And so, I realised that if I wanted to have my seat at the senior table, I probably need to do something else. And so I decided to move to GS1 UK. and where it was a smaller organisation, but I was part of a senior leadership team and had a sort of fresh brief at the same time, but could use some of the experience I had having worked with retail organisations at Wincanton to then sort of bring to bear at DS1 UK. So yeah, those are the two examples that I'd use.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for actually mentioning a bit more about the PR job and how it was there. From what I understood, there are a bit of differences when it comes to Germany and the UK, for example. And since you've mentioned that you've spent many years in Germany and you've worked as well with teams from there, I would like to kind of emphasize a bit, because you said that this PR job has been unstructured, agile, and fun, and always something new, always a new crisis. What are the differences within your Squiggly career between the perception you've had in Germany compared to the UK and the jobs you've had in the two?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to caveat this with I can only comment on it from the experience that I've had, and it probably isn't like this everywhere. But you know, it was earlier on in my career, so I worked there on two different occasions. Firstly, as part of the placement when I was at university in the publishing house, and then secondly, I went out to when the company was acquired to work in southern Germany, a lovely place called Saarbrücken, which is just on the border with France, quite close to Luxembourg. And I was there for about 18 months, and I sort of went in to do a customer service role as I'd been doing over in the UK. And I suppose everybody has certain perceptions of what working in Germany is going to be like. And some of the things were true and some of them weren't. And I was really struck by the real focus on work-life balance that Germany had even then, which I hadn't imagined would be a feature. But it almost felt like a much more mature economy where there was a clear focus on when you were at work and when you weren't at work, and playing was, you know, sort of your social environment and your friends and your family, and having that time carved out and not letting it encroach too much on was really, really important. And whereas I think I'd gone out there with the impression that, you know, everybody in Germany worked so hard, and it was very super efficient, and it wasn't necessarily what I found. I mean, I think it was in manufacturing, so it was very process driven, and a lot of it was very slick, but certainly the focus really was on the work-life balance. And there were some examples that were actually quite strange for me, because we were running a European customer services team out of Germany. And I remember talking to the guy on the Spanish desk, and he was going home at sort of 2:30. And I said, oh, you know, have you got a half day? He said, oh, no, I started at 7 o'clock in the morning because it suited me, and I'm going to go home now. And of course, you'll know that everybody in Spain is just having a lunch at that point. And so there's going to be half the day where there's going to be nobody to actually manage that work. So there were some slightly odd examples like that where I thought, you know, it could actually be a bit more customer focused, and that's where probably Germany could learn from maybe the UK, maybe from the US, certainly at that point in time. So yeah, but I think overall it was a great experience. The other thing was it was much more hierarchical than what I'd known in the UK. So I think we've got culture where you can talk to, you know, people at different levels. There's maybe a lot more matrix involved. It was a lot more hierarchical. And so, for example, it was really unusual that you would talk to somebody who was in the position above your boss. You would always go through your boss, which I found quite strange as well. And the attitude to some of the career pathways and what qualified you to do certain jobs. It was very sort of linear and very traditional. It's people who had done some business degrees. Only people who've done business degrees could do certain things. And there was actually probably a culture in the organisation of almost a real difference between people who've been studied and people who hadn't. Without having the formal career paths there to delineate that, which sort of struck me that they're missing out on some really good skills of people who just haven't had such a traditional route in. And I think that's very pertinent today to tech. And, you know, we're certain if we just relied on that in tech, people who've been through science degrees, we wouldn't have anybody working, but we wouldn't have anywhere near enough people working. And certainly my experience in Germany was that, you know, they had a way to go to be a little bit more flexible. yeah, but I loved my time out there, and I, sort of remember it hugely fondly, and sort of both professionally and personally as well.
All right, thank you. Well, it is quite a difference from what I've heard before regarding your squiggly path and how much this unstructured kind of helped you. And it kind of gave you also creativity and so many transferable skills out of it. While even though the work-life balance in Germany might have been better in that sense, you didn't really see that kind of possibility when it came to your professional career. So I wanted to kind of ask you between this balance about the need for stability and career growth, because in Germany you do see this very clear structure that really helps put up your career growth, and you would know exactly at what time you'd be in what position, etc. You would also have the stability. However, the path you've chosen has been a different one, and it has shown us the possibility of learning new things and not always having that stability behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you balance the two, the stability and career growth, when navigating just the professional life?
I think, I've always been prepared to take on roles where, I've known that I've had areas to develop into. So not being able to, I think if I went for a job and I knew I could do all of it, I'd be a bit bored. So there's always has to be an element where I know that's a bit of a stretch. And so that's important, or something that needs a bit of a turnaround. And so I've been prepared to do that, but I know it's not always right for everybody. So I think if you talk about stability, you've got to think about your whole self and your environment. And I'll say that I've been really lucky because I've got a very supportive husband who's, had more flex in his career than I have, and actually now has his own business. So that's allowed me to spend more time doing long commutes, doing longer hours, and maybe having less flexibility. But I know I've got that as a luxury, and not everybody has. So I think it's about what's right for you at the time. And also then sort of stepping back and making sure that it's not all consuming, and that, part of having stability in career is that you've got sort of a happy environment around you. So I'm certainly very conscious that I would need to make sure that, the people in my life, so my husband and my two kids who are older now, sort of make sure that they get enough of my attention and they get opportunity to do things that are important to them. So it's all a bit of a balancing act on the personal and professional front. But I think in terms of the need for stability and feeling comfortable, it is important to recognise when you're going to get the formal training in these roles and when you're not going to get the formal training. So I've had, I think the start of my career when I did the graduate scheme, as you'd expect, that's really, really structured, and you go through a process. But other places, so even in a large company like in Canton, it was not structured at all. And there was, even when I got promoted, I didn't have any form of training or coaching or anything to sort of help me adapt to that. And so, certainly now as a leader, I sort of look and think, well, the answer to how do I develop isn't necessarily I've been on this course, I want to go on this course, or the company needs to pay for me to go on this course. It's about, who do you need to talk to, what gaps have you got, understanding those gaps. And certainly at BCS we've got great tools for helping people to understand that, and I wish I'd have had that in my career in other instances. So I do think you have to have much more of a self-starting view and a critical appraisal of where you are and where your gaps are and what's practical for you to do, so that you can feel a bit more stable and a bit more comfortable in what you're doing. So hopefully that's kind of answered the question in a roundabout way.
It definitely did, and it actually was the perfect ending for me to make the introduction to our new topic. So you mentioned the fact that sometimes you would have formal training and not, and to kind of really know the difference between the two and to kind of expect it. So I want to talk more about growing into leadership and team culture, because now with your new role, you do have this opportunity of creating your own culture and to foster the communication within your team and to foster certain values within it. You've also mentioned before that you had a story for us about when you worked directly under the CEO but weren't part of the executive team. So you kind of knew you didn't have the chance to foster people and to kind of grow into that leadership. So can you tell me more about the transition of this and how it contributed to where you are now?
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot about managing people along the way. I mean, when you get your first management role age 28, you kind of know nothing really use of it. And I think the textbook applies in a lot of cases, but it doesn't. I think sometimes you have to just learn by not always getting it right, really, and by looking at how other people do things and being open to sort of making some changes. So I suppose where I am, I don't have a massive team, but the principles probably apply whether you have 4 people or whether you have, 30 people or whether you have 200 people. I think it is around having enough structure so that people broadly know what they're there to do, and having the comfort of, understanding what the role's about and how they contribute to the overall success of what you're trying to achieve. And I think certainly working in an organisation that's got much stronger charitable purpose, and I know we're going to talk about that, makes that easier because you can see how all of that connects and adds up to making an impact. But in terms of having a plan, I think you need to get the people around you to help shape the plan. And certainly one of the things that I learned when I was at Wincanton was that I kind of made that leap from running a team where I knew I could step in at any point and do any of their roles to running a team where there were bits of the team where I wasn't the expert at all. And that's a big, big leap. Also, when you're promoted up into a leadership role, you've had a peer group who's part of your team and you suddenly become the manager. And you kind of almost have to realise that you can't always be everybody's friend. And, you're going to have to sort of reset the professional relationship so that you're creating a really positive culture. But there is, somebody has to lead the team and you need to, the buck stops with you to get things done. So I suppose the way that I approach things are to try and strike the right balance between involving people and helping to shape a plan, but also making sure that you can get the feedback and encouraging people to work with each other. So we always have with a team member, we'll have a one-to-one check-in every couple of weeks, but we'll also have I have a direct reports meeting with my direct reports and encourage them to talk to each other and troubleshoot between and support each other in that meeting, which I think works pretty well. And also then creating ad hoc opportunities to, if there's a new process that needs to be developed or if there's a new something that isn't working that you need to sort it. So these sort of spinning up quick action groups and getting people to help solve those problems can be quite motivating, quite positive for the team culture. At BCS, we work with a system that some of you may know, which is around insight. So it's about profiling preferences, working preferences, and it's based on the 4 colours. So the preferences and the colour energies all represent a certain preference or kind of trait. So, for example, and the principle is that everybody will have a blend of these colours, but will have dominant, either 1 or 2 dominant colours that will shape how they like to lead, how they behave, and what their needs are for communicating and working with other people. So I think having that, although we don't have lots of formal training in the role that we are at the moment, certainly in the role that I've had necessarily, just having that across the whole organisation means that we've got a common language in understanding others. So yellow is sort of, in terms of the 4 colours, yellow is creative and sort of innovative. Red is kind of action focused. Blue is more analytical, and green is very sort of people focused. So we quite often on our signatures, people internally will say, this is my brick and how it stacks up. These are my 4 colours and which the dominant ones are. And just having that and being able to work within a team on that also helps you to recognise who are the introverts, who are the extroverts, who's always going to jump in first for their opinion and who needs a little bit longer. And I think it's important to not just listen to the voices always pipe up when to understand whether things are working or not. We had a survey at BCS that talks about, you know, how is it in your part of the business? What's the cohort saying about leadership and about their careers and development opportunities? And so we had this come back, and so what I did this year was to actually ask a group of people who wouldn't necessarily always have been the first to sort of say, oh, you know, this is what I think, to then go back and sort of chat to some of the rest of the team to sort of unpack what was meant by some of those sentiments and give some more insights on what they'd like to see change and be different. So I think just using things like that can be quite effective as well. So yeah, I think that's probably all I'll say on that one for now, if it's helpful.
It definitely is helpful, and it's lovely to see the idea of fostering team culture through, first of all, a common language that you can all speak and base yourself on, and then the idea of always being as communicative as possible. My next question, since we're in a Wominspiration, and since we are talking about women that inspire us, I think a very important elephant in the room, especially when it comes to leadership and team culture, is women in the workplace. So I wanted to ask you if you could tell us about an event that has formed you or your team in regards to the way in which women are treated in the workplace and within these teams.
Yeah, I think my observation is that we've come an awfully long way since I started working. And, you know, what would have been acceptable behaviour when I started working just absolutely would not be acceptable behaviour now. And I'm not talking about anything sort of particularly lewd or awful. It's just, you know, just the level of voice that women have and how it's expected now that, you know, everybody contributes. And I think the fact that we've got inclusion as a you know, part of every business's narrative now, you know, is really important to reinforce that that's the only way a business is going to be successful. And that there wasn't the benefit of that when I first started out. And I think, you know, going into manufacturing and then logistics, I sort of naturally entered two quite male-dominated industries. So certainly, you know, in management roles, I was probably always in the minority and just got on with it. But, you know, one of the things that I'd say is that sometimes it's about who are your role models, and there have been some women in those environments who've been really successful, but have done so by sort of emulating male behaviours and male traits. And, you know, that might work for some people, but it certainly said to me, that's not how I want to be. I want to be able to be myself in an environment. And I want to be able to feel comfortable with that. And I think sometimes we talk these days about microaggressions and things like that. And again, we're becoming much more conscious. And so if I look back, you know, we're probably going to talk about imposter syndrome. Sort of some of the things around feeling comfortable or not feeling comfortable might come from, you know, those experiences where you are experiencing a microaggression. I mean, I think one of the examples that I have is when I was at Wincanton and we were going through one of the acquisitions. At that point, I had a big role in engaging with our agency, our financial PR agency, around the results cycle and also around the acquisitions and helping to put together the presentations and pitch to analysts and investors. And there was one of these investor briefings, and, you know, I was part of the team that was going to be presenting, but obviously the CEO was going to be doing it and the finance director were the sort of main events, but I was part of the panel to present this. And it was the start of the event and people were coming in, and this one guy just said to me, oh, can you hang up my coat and get me a cup of coffee? I just remember thinking, well, okay, he obviously thinks I'm the event organizer or something. And I just said, yes, of course, I'll hang your coat up and get you a coffee, and then I'll see you in the room for the presentation shortly. And, you know, and introduced myself, and he obviously felt really embarrassed about what he'd said, but it just comes down to that sort of unconscious bias. And so, you know, these sorts of things just don't help, and they were probably far too frequent in the early days, probably much less so now, although I know that's not everybody's lived experience and we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, that sounds like a handful to take the coffee and the coats if possible, and then also present. But you mentioned before the example itself, you mentioned how this kind of could stem also and be part of your imposter syndrome. So I wanted to add on to that and ask you, is it possible to share an experience where you overcame this imposter syndrome and how it shaped you when it comes to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think I think it's a bit of a theme with me. I don't think I'm ever going to overcome it, but I think what you do is you learn to recognize it and you learn to manage it. And so I've got a few examples of where it's manifested itself. I mean, I think when I was promoted at Wincanton, so what happened basically, the company decided they no longer required the services of the marketing director, the group marketing director, and the group communications director in the same week. And both of those were my respective bosses, and I was doing the UK and Ireland role at that point. And so I was asked to step into that role. I was 5 months pregnant at the time as well, so that was probably also felt quite daunting. And I just sort of got on with it really, and I didn't think to ask for any particular training at that point. What had also happened is that one of my bosses had just hired an internal comms manager, and I'd remembered meeting her during the interview process, and really capable, great experience, a bit older than me, obviously really keen to get her teeth into the role. But I think sometimes women aren't that kind to each other. We can be our worst enemies, and she certainly sort of very much bristled at the thought that she was suddenly going to be managed by me, rather than coming in and being managed by who she thought she was going to be managed by. And it took quite a long time for her to get used to me, and I always felt that I certainly had to earn her respect. And I remember sort of a couple of probably 18 months in, she said, "Oh, you're really growing into the role now." And while that might sound a bit patronizing, I was really pleased to hear that, because I thought, well, I'm obviously kind of getting to where I need to get to from a leadership perspective with her. But I think being in terms of the step up, not being offered any form of coaching or training or whatever, and just being expected to sort of get on with it was possibly not ideal. And if I think I had my time again, I'd probably be now, but if it happened to me now, I'd just be saying, well, if I'm going to do this, what's going to be there to help me? And I was sort of younger and probably a bit more naive at that point, so I didn't ask. I just thought, well, I'm just gonna, this is what's expected of me, so I'll roll my sleeves and get up and get on with it. And so I think that hasn't really helped in terms of me feeling comfortable and belonging in that role. I think another example is that when I was at GS1 UK, I just got asked to speak in front of 800 people at the global conference in Brussels on a brand project that we were doing. And I was quite terrified by that. And then more recently, in my role at BCS, I was asked to go to the Labour Party conference. And, I will say at this point, the BCS goes to all of the party conferences, so we are not partisan, but I only went to the Labour Party conference because we certainly felt that it was really important this year for us to develop profile and relationships with the shadow government, and also to sort of start to try and shape more of their policy direction. So as part of the BCS team, under the very able guidance of our head of policy, went to the Labour Party conference and was asked to sit on one of the fringe events that we had. It was a closed event, was a roundtable on getting more diverse skills into getting more women to go into AI, so that we have a stronger pipeline and also can mitigate any risks around bias. And this panel, this roundtable had sort of absolute legends like Justine Roberts, who's the founder and CEO of Mumsnet, and Anne-Marie McFadden as well from Stemets. And I sort of looked at the list of people that were going, what on earth am I doing here, and what am I going to say that's possibly of interest? But I think with everything else, you really have to take the time to think, well, what am I contributing, and spend a little bit of time thinking about that. So, Dan, our head of policy, was great in terms of coaching me, and actually the points that I made were so different. Everybody had a unique perspective around the table, which is why they've been invited. So I've been invited for a certain perspective. I wasn't expected to know everything that everybody else knew. but it was really important for me to get across, you know, the importance of professionalism, things like that we can say from a BCS perspective. So with imposter syndrome, I think you just need to know the triggers and yeah, think about how to manage it. So I did some media training, I think about a year ago when I first got the role, and with an organisation called Media First. And you know, having worked in PR, I should know this, and I've sort of told many businesses how to do this in the past. But just setting out, thinking about who the communication is for, or who the intervention is for, and the three key things, and really trying to stick to that simplicity of messages is one way that I manage it. I think also if you've got a big presentation to do, you know, get as wide as input as possible to that presentation and talk to people about it as you put it together. You don't have to have all the answers, and do some interesting examples as well. And then practice. So practice it, try it out on different people. And I think if you can also look at, there are lots of examples on LinkedIn where people have really kind of said, oh, I need to do more public speaking and I'm learning to do this. And so I think people are wearing their heart on the sleeve a lot more. It feels like a lot safer space now to, you know, you get credit for trying things. So it goes back to that progression, not perfection message that I had at the beginning. So I think I'll never be done with the imposter syndrome, but I just have to have a bit of a word with myself and go through some of those strategies, and also think about, you know, inspiring people in my network and what they would do and how they would manage it and talk to people.
Thank you very much for that answer. I really like this ending of how honesty brings a safer place and a safer space for others as well. And I think it's really linked to authenticity as well, because the idea of being honest is just you being as authentic as possible. But I would like to come back.
The other example, I saw something great on LinkedIn the other day. It was, you know, one of our trustees, Jo Stansfield, I hope she won't mind me mentioning this, but she's had a career change in the last year. She's gone from a big corporate to working, to having her own consultancy around DDI. And she did a sort of one-pager, a really nice sort of infographic that just talked about things that she'd been involved in and that she was proud of in the year, and some achievements. And it was done in a really, really nice way, laid out beautifully, and just seeing then the reactions that she got to that. You know, I think it is important for yourself as well to think, oh, well, I have come a long way in that time and I've done this and it's made an impact on these people and in these ways. And, you know, so I think we should sort of use the tools that we've got and not be afraid to talk about our achievements as well.
Definitely. I absolutely love this. We should be our own biggest cheerleaders, shouldn't we? And that would definitely help with imposter syndrome. Another thing that I really liked, and I wrote it down, was in the first example that you gave regarding the imposter syndrome, you talked about how you didn't get any training. And that really relates back to the way we even started this little topic of growing into leadership, because it's the lack of training sometimes, and it's the idea that a good leader does offer that space in which you can grow. So going further than that, you mentioned in your first example that you were 5 months pregnant when you got the position. And I wanted to ask you more about your personal drivers and what was your approach to personal development? Because I'm guessing there has been clashes between the personal development and the professional career.
Definitely. I mean, I think, you know, everybody's got choices to make, and you have to weigh up personally what your priority is and what's workable, what's not workable. So there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, I think for me, it's just been, you know, can I balance all of this? You know, is it the right time to be considering such a move, or is it not, based on everything else that's going on? And then I think, you know, even if you want to make a move, or if you're thinking of something different, you don't have to jump at it. You can take time to research it, to explore it, to talk to different people. You know, what's been really valuable for me is that, you know, I look at other role models. I've got, you know, BCS at the moment, I've got two brilliant MDs as women who are sort of the other parts of the group. So who I sort of talk to and you know, in my personal network, I've got a couple of friends who've got good careers in different places and have been great sounding boards for me. And I think it is just doing what's practical for you. You're not always going to have time to be up reading articles from 6 a.m. and, doing structured personal developments if you've got a bit of a crazy personal life. We just have to probably not set yourself such high expectations, and think about, well, what's the one thing that I can do that's a priority today, or one thing that I want to change, and just try and do it in incremental bite-sized pieces. I think for me also, having had coaching at a couple of times in my career, that's been really useful, because I think sometimes you just don't get the opportunity to get different perspectives, and it's nice to have that formal way, either through a coach or a mentor, to have somebody to help you navigate through something. And certainly we've got that opportunity within BCS membership. We've got the mentoring platform, and I know a lot of our members use that, but we should apply that to ourselves personally as well. And I've probably got a more informal network of mentors now, some people that I draw on for different things. And also the coaching that I've had has helped me to grow into certain aspects of what I'm doing or navigate. Actually, one of them did end up with a change in role, which possibly wasn't the intention at the beginning, but I just think it helps you be more aware of yourself.
Definitely. Can you tell us as well, how do you usually balance these personal and professional goals that you have? Because you did say that within the personal development, you kind of take it one day at a time, but I'm sure you have goals as well within the professional side and the personal side of things.
I mean, I think, with my role as MD, we've got a business plan. We've got, actually, there's quite a lot of change in our business plan this year. We're sort of working differently in terms of, we're looking to work differently regionally. We're looking at a sort of hub model. We're piloting our first hub in Wales, and that's a different way of working within the community that we're just trying to bring together at the moment. So there's a very strong goal around that. I think also in our corporate engagement, sort of forming deeper corporate relationships with some of the contacts that we've got, and finding ways to do that within the team. So I'm very big, and also the CPD platform that we've launched, BCS Discover, and so that we can support more of our members in using that and providing materials that are going to be useful for their own CPD and development. So very clear professional goals. I think also for me, becoming more comfortable with the sort of external influencing. I'm doing more things like this. I'm going to the Labour Party conference. Obviously that's not going to be every day, but those sorts of environments where you're out with at events with other organisations, where I've got the opportunity to position some of the programmes that BCS is doing. It's an entirely new skill set, and you don't know until you try, so you can prep a bit for those things and try the narrative that works, things that don't work so well, but not set too high expectations. I think allow yourself, be kind to yourself, allow yourself the space to learn and grow. And then I think personally, it's just sort of keeping an even keel with the family life, and also just having a little bit of me time as well. I'm going to Italy in February and want to do a bit of Duolingo learning. So those would be the things I pull out.
Sounds like great personal goals as well for the new year. All right. Let us talk, because you talked about your professional goals, and you talked about the goals and the trajectory for this year as the lead for the Institute at BCS. So tell us more about the future of tech at BCS and the goals that there are within the landscape here.
I think it's been a really, really interesting sort of 6 months. I mean, unsurprisingly for BCS, it's all been about AI, and I think that tests us in terms of the way that we're set up and how ready we are to respond. But actually, if you look at the way that we're approaching it, we know that we've got influencing to do. So the Labour Party conference being one example, sort of trying to put a mark on the policy landscape. I'd imagine where we're going to be having an election at some time this calendar year, so we want to sort of clearly put the right messages in the manifestos around responsible tech, and actually the need for a bit more guidance and potentially regulation around AI. I know it's been deregulation been ruled out in the short term, but certainly the benefit that we've got as BCS is we've got a collection of really well connected, really capable members who are engaged with the development of things like European standards, and so we can gather that expertise to sort of strengthen the BCS voice and try to influence the key parties around AI and the direction that we want to take it. At the same time, I feel we've got a responsibility to help our members and help businesses navigate the changes. Certainly, you know, through the dealings that we have with organisations, you know, if you're not an IBM or if you're a smaller business, you're not sure who to trust, what to invest in first, and how far to let it go in terms of people exploring and trying things versus, you know, committing to bringing new technologies into their environments. And we've certainly been working with we held a CIO network of some of the corporate links that we've got to help understand the different use cases, and also to talk a bit more about things like ethics. So that's another sort of spin on the AI debate at the moment. And then also some more structured things. We just published a book as BCS around ChatGPT, and it's crazy to think that was hardly even a feature just 12 months ago. But I think it was end of November 2022 that it was launched, wasn't it? And then we also, through our role as a professional body, we were approached by the incoming Lord Mayor of London, Michael Manelli, to look at some more structured qualifications for the financial services sector. So we've just today announced the pilot of the AI Builder certifications that Lucy's L&D team have worked to put together. And I think this is a really interesting sort of centerpiece that we've got, which is sort of 14 different modules around people who are designing and building AI systems and what they need to think about and what skills they need to have. That's eminently transferable and could actually be the centerpiece of a more structured, you know, competence-based, you know, registration in the future. So we're certainly going to be looking at AI and thinking more towards, well, what does a professional, people who are involved in AI systems, what skills and competencies do they need, and what's our role as BCS in helping to steer that as the landscape evolves. And then we don't ever stand still. We're talking about quantum as well. So we have this Fellows Technical Advisory Group that has a sort of collection of experts. We've got currently a quantum group that we've spun up just to sort of help develop the expertise in quantum, because, you know, the very nature of tech is that something else is on the horizon and will start to emerge, and we need to be ready for that, and we need to help our members be ready for that as well.
Very interesting. So you did mention you talked a lot about responsible tech while within all the projects that involve AI, and also the ethics of things. And I just wanted to ask, as one of the heads of BCS, what are exactly the challenges related to these ethical considerations, and what principles do you use in guiding the decisions that you take into every day and to where you put your focus on?
I think as for me personally, I'm probably going to talk about it more in terms of the role of BCS. So as a professional body by our nature, we've got, I think our principles are founded on the fact that our members sign up to a code of conduct, which is rooted in ethical practice. So that's the absolute starting point. So anybody who's a member of BCS will sign that code of conduct when they join. And those are the principles through which we look at things. And, you know, I think at the moment we've got, you know, the Horizon scandal and all of the publicity around that and the series. It's just so heartbreaking that it's gone so horribly wrong, and that these things can still happen. And if you sort of unpack that, it doesn't, you know, I know there was the element around software in the first place that was developed that was faulty, but it's a whole series of considerations around the culture, around leadership, around ethical decision making, around governance and the way things are set up, and this all works together. So I think when we talk about responsible tech, you know, the technology itself is just one small part of it. we've been talking for many years around the fact that the tech sector is really exciting, really fast moving. That's a great thing, but at the same time, you don't always have the checks and balances and guardrails. And certainly when you've got a skill shortage as well, and you're bringing people in from different routes, you know, we don't have the maturity and the frameworks yet to ensure that everybody's got the right level of competence, and I think certainly we have things within our armour as BCS, so chartered IT professional, and the way and the process that people go through with that really does sort of nudge people more towards, well, this is what competent ethical professionals would look like, and these are the technical skills, the leadership skills, and the sort of ethical framework that I'm applying to my particular specialism. And so we'd really like to see more of that. We'd like to see it formalised more, you know, ideally led by government, as something that's going to be important to lead us through the ethical challenges that we're going to be facing. And certainly to, you know, add weight. We recently did a survey of our members, and I think what was fascinating was that 30% of members have said that they'd, in the last 12 months in their roles, they'd experienced some kind of ethical dilemma. And the verbatims that came out of it as well, when reading sort of what people have put, you know, a couple of people have said they'd actually had to leave their job because, you know, there wasn't a mechanism for whistleblowing, or it wasn't taken seriously enough. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be done to raise awareness about the critical nature of some of the systems that we're developing, and some of the transformation that's naturally happening, and why we need to have those sort of mental checklists that people go through when they're balancing commercial objectives with actually outcomes.
That's definitely something to think of, especially because as within BCS, we take the code of conduct as high importance, and we always try to make the best practices and do IT for good. And in that sense, I didn't expect all these AI advancements and just the technology advancements to lead to moments in which the ethical considerations are so taken out of context or not putting enough emphasis on it. So in that sense, other than the structure, within the structure things on AI, you mentioned the book on ChatGPT and also the AI Builder pilot. How is BCS taking its ethical principles and putting them in practice in the industry as much as possible? So is it through the collaborations with the government mostly, or just...
Yes, I think so. We've got a paper, so our Fellows Technical Advisory Group is, you know, they were sort of created in the first place to help steer us around thought leadership. And one of the topics that's come out of that group is, you know, that we needed to do more around ethics to bring the sort of AI debate to life. That was actually led by our ethics specialist group. And so, you know, that will be coming out really shortly to kind of give us more of that mandate to talk about, you know, is now the right time to be having a license to practice? And certainly that narrative and that thread will then flow through the way that we talk to government, the way that we link the themes together. And so that's sort of how we want to position it. And then just to get our members to talk more about their experiences and to explore the different use cases and how those could be considerations. You know, I think it really is about getting more members to participate in the discussions with their peers. And I think the more that happens, the more that we then know, and the more that we can feed it into those conversations that we're having.
Talking and building up on that and the importance of communication, especially when it comes to ethics, you mentioned that you're a trustee for the internet safety charity, Southwest Grid for Learning. Can you tell us more about it and the work that you do there as a trustee?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they are they're an organisation that BCS has actually partnered with in the past around our barefoot computing programme, and their heritage really was in schools initially, to put infrastructure into schools, you know, sort of broadband capabilities, and they've really transformed themselves over the past 10 years to be at the forefront of systems that go into schools to enable schools to understand more about internet safety and usage within the school environment. and sort of flag up risks and have alert systems and gathering in that data so that overall safety levels in schools who are sort of using multiple devices and iPads is upheld, so that young people can't access things that they shouldn't be accessing. And we've all heard the high profile cases where this has gone wrong. So it's really to kind of safeguard and help schools to have as safe an environment as possible. But the other aspect is working with the platforms, the tech platforms, and looking at things like things like revenge porn, and indecent images, and sort of creating technical mechanisms so that the platform can collaborate to take those down and to protect the victims. So a sort of small charity has a really, really big impact in some of these aspects that directly relate and crystallise within the online safety bill. And is doing great work to bring the platforms together, but also to lobby governments and to improve the environment in schools as well. So, and the role of a trustee, it's just overseeing the programme. And I think somebody once said, eyes, is it fingers out, eyes in, or something? I can't remember what the idea is, that you sort of have oversight, you look at the programmes and you support and guide, but you leave the running of the business to the executives. So that's kind of the approach that we take, but really proud of the work that they're doing.
The reason I asked is because somebody else within the chat also asked about what it was called, and then I wanted to just offer a bit more information about it as well.
That was Sharon that knows his name. It was you, Sharon, that I got it from and got the wrong. So thank you for correcting me.
Okay, well, I think this is actually a good moment in which to ask you also about your goals for the new year. Since we're at the beginning of our wonderful year, and we talked a bit about the personal drivers and personal goals versus professional goals. From what I understand, the professional goals are kind of already set out, and it's a very structured and clear path. But what are some of your goals for this new year?
So personally, professionally, a bit of everything?
A bit of everything.
I'd really like to see, we've started some fantastic conversations in Wales. We've got a hub that we're developing in Wales. So what we've done is we've recognised the strength of our branches in Wales, and also the fact that we work with universities in Wales, and we've got some corporate partners who've there as well. So we're trying to say, well, let's bring the BCS collaborators together and help shape a programme that's going to complement the work that the branches are doing, and sort of almost help to amplify it, but maybe lead to new opportunities and allow for a broader set of people to participate in the activities of BCS. And I think, to an extent, we've got some of that working with BCS in Scotland already. I think this is going to bring in some of our corporates as well, maybe some training providers, maybe some universities. So quite exciting stuff. So I'd like to see a bit more shape around that, and also maybe thinking about our second hub.
Already.
So that's one thing. I think also I'd love to see progress around, we're looking at our chartered IT professional registration at the moment. And, given everything I've said about now is the time, and it's really, really important to be able to kind of articulate that competence and what good looks like. We're doing some research just to make sure that that's properly connected into what industry wants from that, and that we're reflecting that. And so we're looking to modernise chartered IT professionals. So that will be kind of done towards the end of the year. So we're in the research phase at the moment. So I'd like to see that come to fruition and lead to a much more sort of powerful registration that's going to be more attractive out in industry. So that's another thing. And then also we're doing some work in our member groups community to sort of explore inclusion and barriers to inclusion, and to really sort of think about the inclusion officer role that we've got in some of the branches, what that means, and how, overall we present a more inclusive face and opportunities for everybody to participate. So we're doing a study at the moment to understand that, and to really sort of be our best selves in that regard. So I'd like to see that leading to some really good outcomes for BCS. And personally, I've got a real interest in getting this right as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm just gonna head now to the Q&A and to try to answer a few of the questions within the chat. Angela asked, if you have a squiggly career and want now to get into tech, what is the best route in?
Well, I think there are lots of answers to that. It depends on your starting point. I think identifying those transferable skills, there's lots of bite-sized learning out there that you can do, lots of things within BCS. You've got short courses as well. I know we have boot camps that we work with that enable you to do sort of short, sharp 12-week courses that you can upskill in different areas of tech. That have then direct links into employers. So there are plenty of those funded schemes. And so I think it is actually looking at what's available out there. Or could you get some funded place on something like that? Or could you get something like a degree apprenticeship or an apprenticeship to sort of help change direction? But I think, with everything else, you've got your due diligence to do, you've got your people to talk to and really sort of thinking about your own skills and the ones that are transferable and therefore the best route into tech that you would have. So I think that's how I would answer that one.
Going through the transferable skills is always a good benefit.
I think there are some great examples. So one of our, I'm going to get her title wrong now. She's one of the senior managers internally in BCS. She started out in project management, customer services, then project management, and then she's gone more into this sort of BA transformation, management role. So she's taken that pathway from customer services. So it is definitely possible, and there are examples out there.
Okay, Sia asked, are there any initiatives at present to get more women into tech, particularly if one doesn't have a tech background?
There are so many. I think the boot camps that I just mentioned, you've got lots of brilliant organisations that we collaborate with. You've got, you've got Coding Black Females, you've got Tech You Can, you've got Tech Up, you've got lots of different organisations that have programmes. And lots of new ones popping up all the time as well. And I know that there's some more funding for another big scheme that's a private one that's coming up soon that we're talking to. So I think, and then you've got the returner schemes that could be helpful, and some of those have lists of different courses on there. I think Women Returners is one that certainly has a few reference points. So I think BCS Women also have quite a lot of information on that. So I'd encourage you to engage with some of the folk from BCS Women on that too.
Definitely BCS Women would have a lot of information regarding them.
And we actually have, I think it's the 29th of April, so BCS Women, we're going to be working with BCS Women to support an event called Return or Pivot into Tech. And so that's going to be in the London office on the 29th of April. So if the information's not up yet, it will be very shortly. So that will be something to check out. And that will bring together training providers, people who've made that change already, and also corporate. So yeah, watch the space for that one.
Great. Kitty asked, how will you help drive BCS to be a brand in the industry amongst employers that BCS members and BCS fellows are gold standard to hire? So really emphasizing your work with the companies as well and the memberships.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some brilliant companies that we work with. We're starting to get the companies to talk to each other as part of things like our CIO network. We've had some great organisations join us this year. So we had KPMG sort of about 18 months ago come on board. We've got Department of Work and Pensions. That's another very big scheme. So I think there are companies out there who are absolutely recognising that, they want to work with BCS and see us as a real way of providing that, enabling them to kind of understand more about how to develop their own workforces, but also empowering their own people to, take a more exploratory view and to complement what's available internally. And certainly as part of those corporate programs, what we do is we really try to emphasize the registrations track and try and make sure that everybody understands, you know, this interrogates the Sophia framework, the skills for the information age, that sets out the different skills, the different levels. And then, you know, we encourage more people to take chartered. And so I think those are our great champions, and the more people that do that, the better, really. So, you know, Kitty, if you've got any ideas of who we should talk to on that to get more people involved. And at the same time, what we'll do is we'll sort of go out with refreshed chartered IT professional registration at the back end of the year. Hopefully that will start to make some headway.
Great. Samantha asked if you always knew what direction you wanted to go ahead in before making a move, or was it more making the best decision between the opportunities that were available at the time? So in regards to the squiggly careers and the paths we've talked about.
I think, you know, I wanted to be in business. I wanted to be in a leadership role. So I think I had that kind of quite vague goal that sort of set the path that I wanted to progress. But I probably wasn't as structured in the how. And so I think that's been helpful in a sense for me. But I suppose one thing that probably comes back down to the imposter syndrome. Sometimes I do feel like a bit of a jack of all trades. I think it's got its upsides, as we've explored in the conversation today.
Definitely. And there's another question from Simon that we did already explore regarding if there were any of the roles you have. So sorry, it moves, the chat moves. So so Simon asked, have any of the roles you have potentially considered it's time to move from? And if so, was it because the role has changed within the business? So when you decided that it was time to move on from one role to another, was it also because of the changes within the business, as it often happens within the companies, or just...
Yeah, I think one of them wasn't. So the one around the packaging company, when I moved from DS Smith to the PR agency, no, that was entirely driven by me. I think for Wincanton, I just wanted I saw a real opportunity to try and move the brand on and invest in the brand more and make it more powerful. And I think I had a bit of a Groundhog Day moment where I put a similar proposal through and knew I was never going to get the money for it because that it wasn't the right time. And I just sort of felt a little bit blocked and a bit stifled. So there was a change in the business in terms of probably the priority was shifted onto other things. So it wasn't going to enable the scope within that role to do what I wanted to. So kind of yes on that one.
I understand. Victor asked as well, if you were going to start all over today, what would you do differently? What advice do you have for someone who is starting from the beginning and wants to be in your position?
I don't know whether I'd do much differently. If I was starting again now, I'm not sure I would study languages. I honestly think now there's so much more opportunity to travel and so many more resources so that you know, if you've got those, if you can spend sort of shorter bursts in the country, you can get to a really good level, or you could explore careers where you would actually have the opportunity to work in those countries. I'm not sure I would do a formal languages degree again, although it was brilliant because it's sort of, I think going to university teaches you to study and to have the discipline to, you know, actually progress, you know, with your studies and balance other things, and so learn about life. So that bit of it was definitely valuable, and the having the opportunity to spend time in working and living in a different culture. But I don't think I would do that degree. I'm not sure what I would do, to be honest. Maybe just something a bit more general around business and marketing.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, those were all the questions. Thank you very much, Holly, for your time. And I would really like to end with your saying of progression over perfection, because I really feel like it really encapsulates this evening's talk. And
thank you.
Thank you. And now back to you, Dalim.
Wow, that was great. And Holly, you have covered so much ground. It's been really fascinating, as well as yourself. You've managed to tell us quite a lot about the current state of industry, and also very much about the BCS. It's fascinating, and it makes it obvious that there's a world of possibilities, and it's a fast-moving world. So let's look into 2024. Let's see where we go from here. And I'd just like to make two comments in terms of the audience for this session. There were around about 70 people consistently on this call, including people from up to Scotland, over to Winchester and westwards that way, and of course lots of people in London. Oh, and by the way, the snow is in London rather than in Scotland at the moment, so watch out, you people, get your scarves ready. As far as we're concerned, we had an audience not only of women. This is Wominspiration, inspiring women with inspiration for everyone. It has been rough, the audience has been roughly half male and female, and that's been heartening to see. It's been really fascinating in terms of a lot of the topics we've talked about. I know a lot of people are BCS members and have a vested interest in helping BCS move forward. It's been really heartening to see you have the same intention as well. So thank you very much, Holly. And of course, thank you, Diana, for your moving the questions along and your Q&A during the session. So thank you both. Forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Diana, as well. You're brilliant.
Thank you, Holly.
Great. And to everyone who's on the call, thank you very much for being here and for participating and for hearing all the words of wisdom. Let's try and make use of some of them and move us forward. All the best. Have a great 2024.